It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna, welcome in to a brand new edition, episode number 435 of Rico Brogna. The New York Mets played a split squad on Sunday. They tied a game. They lost the game. They also suffered another injury in spring training, but this injury, while we should feel bad for the player, has really led to questions about calling an old player. We'll get to that as the Rico goes on. We will also get to a couple of interesting answers that Carlos Mendoza gave us when he joined Evan and Tiki on Friday, and we will go deep into the Rico Brogna mailbag. But right before this podcast started, I said to the fine producer of this show, Pete Hoffman, I said, Pete, can you give me a second? I'm about to go to my scorebook library, and I'm going to find an old scorecard, or at least I'm attempting to find an old scorecard that I think is going to help me prove a point, or maybe not prove a point. On our last Rico, you may have heard it, you may not have heard it. I'll summarize real quick. We talked about Juan Soto hitting a home run in his first spring training at bat. And I made the claim to you guys that while it was cool in the moment, and it gave me a quarter of a tingle or a half a tingle, does any of us actually remember spring training debuts of players that we were excited to become New York Mets? So right in this Rico Brogna office that we have, I could flip the camera and show you for the YouTube listeners or viewers, but I'm not going to do it because it takes too much of an effort. I have a library about 5 feet to my left with all my scorebooks. There's like 30 of them, and they're now categorized by year. Nice, neatly organized. And I said, Hoff, I'm going to look for something. Give me 30 seconds. And I found exactly what I was looking for. Now, Pete, you know it's geeky, you know it's dopey, but you know it's sort of timely. What scorecard, before I reveal it, did you think I pulled that I'm about to briefly talk about right now?
I'm going to take a guess and think of Carlos Beltran's first spring training at bat.
That's good, man. Oh, that's good. In fact, I may go do that right now. So you may have to feel free. It's not, but it's close. Oh, I want to take everybody back to my scorecard. I can hold it up and prove it again for the YouTube audience, but it's from February 29th, 2008. So it was a leap year. This game between the New York Mets and the St. Louis Cardinals at the then called Tradition Field was the third spring training game of the year, and it was Johan Santana's first start as a New York Met. And I pulled it because, quite frankly, and I love Johan, and Johan was at Met camp, and he was teaching Sean Manaea changeup, and he was talking glowingly about his time as a New York Met. I love Johan. I have no memory whatsoever of his debut in spring training, and now that I'm looking at it, I find it sort of interesting. The first batter he faced, boy, I wrote really tiny back then, was a guy by the name of Brian Barton, and he got him to fly out to left field. Then he gave up a base hit to Chris Duncan, a double to Albert Pujols, and eventually a 3-run home run to the designated hitter, Juan Gonzalez. Hold on a second.
The Juan Gonzalez?
I don't know. I need to find out more. Can you quickly look up if Juan Gonzalez was in spring training with the St. Louis Cardinals in 2008? Because he was batting fifth, he was the DH, and a fellow by the name of Juan Gonzalez hit a 3-run home run off of Johan Santana in the top of the first inning of Santana's first ever start as a New York Met. Do you have the answer?
Yes, it was him, but he was unable to rejoin the team due to an injury.
So Juan Gonzalez, who we all know, never played for the St. Louis Cardinals, correct?
Correct.
He hit a 3-run home run off Johan Santana. This is why, for anyone who says, why would you score a spring training game, you dopey loser? For anyone who says that, for Michael Kay, for Tommy Lugauer, for all the haters out there, here's why you score a game in spring training in February of 2008. Because you get to reminisce that Juan freaking Gonzalez, of all people, hit a 3-run home run off Johan Santana in Santana's first start as a Met. By the way, he then pitched a scoreless second inning, and that was it. So he ended up pitching 2 innings, 3 runs, 4 hits, no walks, 1 strikeout. He threw 30 pitches over those 2 innings and obviously gave up that home run to Juan Gonzalez. The Mets would lose this spring training game 5-4. David Wright drove in a run with an RBI single, and a young Ruben Gotay would hit a solo home run in the 9th inning that actually made a 5-3 game a 5-4 game. So there you go.
I think I know what we should do for our next rewatch.
Yeah. Boy, that's when you know we've hit rock bottom when we're watching the spring training game. So yeah, I wanted to pull that game. And you brought up Beltran's debut. I can look for that later if that's something you're interested in. And then you find out, like, did I score Beltran's first game as a New York Met? Because there was a time, and certainly even now is the case, where every spring training game wasn't on TV. The way things work now is that every home game is basically on TV, on SNY or on Pix 11, and then road games could be on the MLB app or could be on ESPN or could be on MLB Network, but you're certainly not guaranteed all the road games. Anyhow, that was a little trip down memory lane. Let's get to a little bit of news and notes. We got a lot of emails, a lot of opinions on the ABS. That's the automatic ball strike system that they're trying out here in spring training. So we got a lot to get to, a variety of Met-related topics. But let's start with Nick Madrigal going down with that injury. Very weird injury. Very weird injury. And it's funny. The way I consumed the games today was much more limited than the way I consumed Saturday's game. I scored Saturday's game. I watched the whole thing. Sunday was a very busy day in the Roberts household. My oldest son had a piano recital that began around 4 o'clock. So prior to that, there was a lot of activities going on. But I did have both spring training games on and the Knick game on. You know, not going to get into that. But so it was more a casual watch. So I didn't see the Madrigal play live. I went back. I saw the video of it. Very weird injury. A ball off of the pitcher. Madrigal comes in to try to make that play and then separates his non-throwing shoulder. So it appears as if, and I was talking to Tiki about this, who certainly knows a hell of a lot more injuries than I do as a professional athlete. It could be a serious one, depending on what the MRI says. It could also be, not that serious, and he could be back relatively soon. Madrigal always had a shot to make this team. I wouldn't have called him the favorite by any stretch, but certainly was a part of the mix, but he's learning shortstop. He does not have any experience playing the position. So him being out there in one of these split squad games was also a lesson for all of us, and certainly a lesson for Carlos Mendoza on, can he play shortstop? And I do find this battle, this roster spot battle for the last position player role on the New York Mets to be incredibly fascinating. Now, granted, the Mets don't have a lot of competition, especially when it comes to position players. I mean, the roster is essentially set. We've gone over it. The 2 catchers are Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens. The outfield already features 6 guys. When you look at Brandon Nimmo, Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri, Juan Soto, Starling Marte, and Jesse Winker. Those are 6 guys capable of playing the outfield, 2 of which will mostly DH. And then you've got your everyday infielders, Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, Francisco Lindor, and Mark Vientos. You do the math, you got 12 position players. It only leaves 1 spot left. That spot could go to Nick Madrigal. Obviously, this hurts his chances if he's going to miss a significant amount of time. It could go to Luis Angel Acuna, who took a couple of at-bats on Sunday. It could go to Brett Beatty. The question I've had, and luckily I had a chance to ask the manager this on Friday when he joined the show, is my one Rico Brogna question. Because when you're doing a show that's not the Rico, I've got to, be a little bit more generic for the grander audience, like asking about captainships, which quite frankly, I don't even care about. But I asked the one Rico question, the going in the weeds question, which is, all right, we got 1 bench spot. Does that guy have to be able to play shortstop? Because right now, the only shortstop on the roster is Francisco Lindor. You're selecting 1 extra infielder because every other piece we're talking about that we mentioned are outfielders or catchers. So you have 1 backup infielder the Mets are going to take. Do you need that guy to be able to play shortstop? Or is it okay if he just plays third base and second base? Remember, you don't need a backup first baseman because as long as you have a guy that can play third base, Mark Vientos is your backup first baseman. You could also argue that Jesse Winker could turn into a backup first baseman, considering he's taken at least a handful of ground balls at first base, and talked after he re-signed that contract about potentially learning a little bit more of first base. So I want to play Carlos's answer, and then we'll dive deeper into this, including if Jose Iglesias should get a phone call. But here was me asking the question of Mendy and his answer from his interview he did with us on Friday concerning the importance of that backup infielder having any experience at shortstop.
You guys need a backup shortstop because I'm looking at that last utility spot, and it could be Brett Beatty, who's not a shortstop, Jared Young, who's not a shortstop, Nick Madrigal's learning shortstop, and obviously Luis Angel Acuna, who can play shortstop. Is it essential in your mind as manager to have a guy that can be a backup shortstop, or would you be comfortable going to opening day without having a guy on this roster not named Lindor who's played the position?
Yeah, look, as a manager and for us as an organization, the conversation's been, God forbid, something happens to Lindor. You need someone to go out there and play, say, 4 innings, 3 innings. It's a blowout, and you want to give Francisco off his feet. You want to make sure you feel comfortable who's playing the last couple of innings of a game, right? That's for me. That for us, that's basically, the conversation is. Can we trust this guy to play and finish to finish a game? Now, if Lindor needs a couple of days, or if God forbid, he's down for an extensive period of time, that's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
But we do feel good. We mentioned Acuna, Madrigal, Brett Beatty is going to start at third and second. He's getting just work there during batting practice. Not sure we'll see him in games, especially this early. Now we get to the middle of March, and we want to see him, and he's comfortable, and he's ready to go for a game action. Sure, we could put him out there because he's part of that competition. So to answer that question, someone that at least can give you a few innings, maybe a game if needed. But if he's an extensive absence from Lindor, then you're looking at somebody that can really give you a chance and hold the position.
So that answer tells us Brett Beatty has a shot. He really does, because all Mendy would need from that last bench spot is, can you go out and play a few innings at shortstop in a 14-1 game because we want to get Lindor off his feet? Can you go out and play shortstop for the last few innings of a game because, God forbid, Lindor got hurt? You're not looking at someone that's really ever going to play the position on any kind of part-time basis. It's more, can you do it for a few innings, which tells you a few things. Number one, the idea that in this season with Francisco, he's going to get a day off once a week or a DH day every once in a while, you could throw that out. As long as the Mets aren't carrying a true shortstop like a Luis Angel Acuna, that's not happening. Now, Lindor is 31 years old. He's coming off of one of the best seasons of his career. You could argue statistically it was the best year of his career, certainly the best year he's had as a New York Met, legitimate MVP candidate. That, hey, if you want to try to be smart with him, guy who's played 150 games 3 consecutive years, it behoove him and behoove the Mets to force an off day on him. You're not forcing an off day on him if your backup shortstop is Brett Beatty. You're not. You're not forcing an off day on him if that's your backup plan. Now, if Luis Angel Acuna's on the team, I think you have a little bit more leeway to say, all right, Francisco, we're giving you DH day. Now, the other aspect of this, look, let me give you my opinion right off the top before we evaluate this even more. I feel bad for Nick Madrigal. All right, no one wants to see a guy get hurt. Nick Madrigal is not my first option for that role because, quite frankly, when am I ever using him? Like, ask yourself that question. So if you have one backup infielder, when are you ever using Nick Madrigal? When? Are you bringing him in late for defense? Is that what you're doing? Well, where are you doing it? Are you putting him at third base for Mark Vientos? I mean, I guess it's possible. Where are you bringing him in? Are you bringing him in as a pinch hitter for anybody? Never. Like, who's he pinch hitting for in a game? So now you start to say, well, does he have speed? Can he steal a base? You look at his minor league numbers, he's not exactly a speedster. I mean, he can steal a couple of bases. He's certainly more of a threat than a lot of guys on this roster, but he's not Luis Angel Acuna. Like, if you're looking for somebody on your bench that you can use as a pinch runner, because you're down a run in the 9th inning, and let's say Francisco Alvarez leads off with a walk, and you're like, screw it, man. This is a Dave Roberts situation. We need a guy on base who can steal a bag. Nick Madrigal, not slow-footed, but he stole 35 bases in the minor leagues like 5 years ago. Luis Angel Acuna is your option. So if that's what you're looking for, defense, versatility, speed, the ability for Lindor to not play a game once in a while, then clearly the option is Luis Angel Acuna. If you're looking for a stick, if you're saying to yourself, you know what, late in the game, I may pinch hit for Starling Marte, or late in the game, tough righty, I may pinch hit for Tyrone Taylor or Jose Siri, which is probably what I should have started with, because I think that's more realistic than pinch hitting for Starling Marte. I don't know how often we'll see that, and how often we saw that last year. We'll see it the other way, where Jesse Winker gets pinch hit for. But let's take a look at center field. Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri. I could absolutely see a spot where late in the game you want a left-handed bat up there for your weak-hitting center fielder. Well, then Brett Baty's your option. And I'm not getting nuts over his double earlier today on Sunday, and then he scored on a balk. I'm just saying in general, he's got more bat potential. So if you're looking for the bat, if you're looking for the stick off the bench, Brett Baty is the guy. But he fits what Mendy said, where he's playing maybe 2 or 3 innings at shortstop. You're not starting a game with Brett Baty at shortstop. And then you have pick up the phone and call Jose Iglesias, which I know a lot of Met fans want, and I'm not against it by any stretch, especially when you look at the different options in terms of who's the super utility guy. How about a guy that can play third base, shortstop, and second base brilliantly? I just don't think, and I could be wrong here, I don't think the Met view on all the infielders that they have and the young infielders that they have, specifically Acuna coming up, I don't know if their view on calling Iglesias changes, because Nick Madrigal, who was signed to a split contract anyway, who's not a prospect, who's 28 years old next week, who's a borderline major leaguer, I don't think him getting hurt, no matter how serious the injury is, would change the Mets' opinion on bringing back Jose Iglesias. I just don't. So for everyone out there that looked at this injury and said, this means OMG is coming back, I just don't agree with you. I'm not against it. Look, they need a utility infielder. Right now, I do not think Ronnie Mauricio is an option. Let's put him to the side for now. Maybe an option in May, maybe an option in June, but considering the guy did not play last year, he's not going to play in spring training till the middle of March. I just don't think it's realistic. So you're really looking at Brett Baty, who gives you the offense, Luis Angel Acuna, who gives you the speed and the versatility, or Nick Madrigal, who gives you what? I guess he gives you the glove. I haven't watched him enough to tell you how good he is defensively at third base or second base. And he was a former top prospect. 4 or 5 years ago, Nick Madrigal was regarded as one of the better prospects. But how is he defensively at second base and third base? Like, even if he's great, when's he playing? And this is where I think Baty and Acuna clearly are ahead. If the Mets and Mendy are going to give guys off days, specifically Jeff McNeil, because I can see Vientos playing every day. I could see it. We've seen Lindor and Alonso play every day. The one guy who doesn't play every day is Jeff McNeil. Like, even when he's healthy, you'll see him get off days. You'll see McNeil not be in the lineup every single day. In fact, take a look at his major league career. You see plenty of days in which McNeil just doesn't start. May come in the game late, but will not start. So who's playing second base on those days? And I get Acuna. I think he's certainly up there. But Brett Baty, that could be his opportunity to show he can hit. Because the other avenue where Baty can stick, if he hits, if he proves, hey, all that potential I have, I'm finally showing it to you, he can end up being a DH and playing a lot. I mean, there could be a scenario, and I know this hurts this team defensively, where Brandon Nimmo plays more center field than maybe we imagine, and Jesse Winker's playing left field, and Brett Baty's DHing. There are a lot of scenarios where that plays out. Now, the other thing that Carlos Mendoza did, and I think a lot of people in this audience will appreciate it, because They didn't like my opinion on the lineup. I know. I see your emails. You said, Evan, blah, blah, I love you, blah, blah, you're nice, blah, blah, you're so good looking, but your idea of hitting Pete Alonso is stupid. That's fine. I get it. And I never expected that the Mets would hit Pete Alonso second. I never thought, even when I was thinking about it for months and months and months, but didn't want to talk about it on the Rico because Pete hadn't re-signed, I never once thought Carlos Mendoza is going to bat him second. But I've laid out my thoughts on past Rico Brognas. Not going to waste your time with it again on giving Pete protection, giving him incredible pitches to hit instead of chasing sliders low and away because he's being protected by garbage. Like, that's a part of my intrigue with it. So when Carlos joined the show on Friday, I brought it up. And I gave him the opportunity to put me out of my misery and say, Evan, I'm not hitting Pete Alonso second. Well, you can hear our exchange. And for those that do not like my idea of hitting Pete Alonso second, Merry Christmas.
I have an idea that everybody hates. So you have a chance as the manager of the Mets to confirm most Met fans' agreement that my idea is terrible. And you can say, Evan, thank you,
What's
but
your
no.
idea?
I'm going to tell you right now, and then you could kill it. I'll never talk about it again if you just tell me, Evan, I'm not even considering it. I really am intrigued by Pete Alonso batting second and Juan Soto protecting him in that 3-hole. Lindor, Alonso, and Soto. Have you given that any thought?
Nope.
They're
Come
right.
on.
So what are you considering? Go ahead.
I mean, it's 162 plus, hopefully, right? That's the goal. And who knows? But as I'm sitting here, and I've been playing around a lot of different lineups and how you envision it. And Pete's between Lindor and Soto. I don't think I wrote that lineup yet.
Oh, wow. So he's considered so many different things. That one I've never considered. So what I will say to the Rico audience is I take my L. I take my L with a lot of pride. I still believe in the idea. I'm intrigued by the idea of hitting Pete Alonso second, but clearly it is dead upon arrival. If I had to predict, and we are sitting here still in late February, we haven't even hit March 1st yet. So it's tough to think we're getting closer to opening day when the month still begins with the number 2. But I do think Juan Soto will bat second. I think that's where he's leaning. And I think when we're sitting there, opening day, New York Mets, Houston Astros on March 27th, and I certainly hope there are no injuries, I think we are looking at just a prediction now. Lindor, Soto, Pete, Nimmo, Vientos. I think he'll split the righties up. He'll stick Nimmo in the middle of it. And that's my prediction on what the lineup is going to look like when we get to opening day. But I appreciate Carlos because one thing about him that's different than a lot of other managers is he's just telling you the truth, man. He's very straightforward with a lot of these questions. So even that, me suggesting Pete Alonso batting second, there are a lot of managers that would meet a question like that by saying, yeah, we're considering everything and giving you a non-answer. Well, he gave an answer. Nope. That's a pretty direct answer. And I do very much appreciate that. This is the fun part. When you have a good lineup, and I think the Mets have a chance to have a really, really special lineup, which we're going to get into. We're going to do a Rico in just a couple of days. I look forward to it, in which we specifically compare last year's team and the performance of last year to this year's team and how much better they can be or where they've gone backwards. And you will hear in that podcast in just a couple of days why I'm so high on this offense and why I think this offense can be better than what it was last year and what history tells us about an offense that's that good. So this is a lot of fun. The key is, and I'm going to knock on wood when I say this, everybody gets through camp healthy. That's the ultimate key. It sucks to see anybody get hurt. I feel bad for Nick Madrigal. I feel bad for Frankie Montas. I feel bad for any major leaguer that gets hurt. But man, we cannot see an injury to one of the key guys. Now let's get to some of your emails, thericob@gmail.com. On episode 434, we did a fun half-hour Rico after the Mets' first spring training game, in which Juan Soto hit that home run. But one of my takeaways was ABS, which is the automatic ball strike replay system that they are testing in spring training. And again, if you're new to this isn't going to be in the major leagues this year. This is just a test that they're doing, and they've been doing it at the minor league level. And this year, they're doing it in spring training, where each team gets 2 challenges. The batter, the catcher, and the pitcher are the only ones allowed to issue a challenge. They tap their head, and within 10 seconds, we're seeing this really cool graphic that tells us if it's a ball or strike. I do not like this. My idea would be just have a robo-ump. Why are we adding technology to only get 2 plays or 4 plays or maybe a handful more corrected over the course of a game, as opposed to just having every call correct from the beginning? That I don't understand. Let's get to some of your opinions on such. Tom from Wesley Chapel, Florida. I got to be honest, I've never heard of that place. But then again, my only knowledge on cities in Florida would be about spring training homes or voting sites. That's my knowledge of Florida, the 2000 election and spring training. Outside of that, I hate Florida. So I hope Wesley Chapel's a nice place, Tom. Tom writes, I wanted to react to your comments regarding ABS and why not use it for every pitch of the game rather than it just for 2 challenges. Most would agree the bottom line is the need to ensure critical calls be made correctly. Now that Angel Hernandez is gone, I think it can be said that the remaining human umpires are extremely accurate and that only a very small number of calls are missed in a game, and even fewer are missed that have consequence. Over the course of an entire game, the human umpire and the robot umpire are going to be in agreement almost all the time. In a perfect world, the umpires would be 100% perfect and the full human element would remain. Allowing just a limited number of challenges preserves the human element while allowing a remedy where the game's outcome might be in question by a blown call. I vote for the limited approach. And then he compliments. By the way, we like compliments. I think that I'm an awkward human. I'm very awkward. And so when someone says something nice, instead of me being able to just say, hey, thank you, I appreciate that, Hoff appreciates that, I get awkward. So I'm gonna do better at not being awkward when people say nice things. So it was so tough in high school because all the girls would say, you're so good looking. And I didn't know what to say. I'm just kidding. That never happened. So Tom said, you're producing some excellent content. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Tom. Hoff and I appreciate that. So I get your approach and I get what you're saying, because much to the disbelief of many, major league umpires are actually really good. They are. And sometimes because the technology is so good and TV is so good and the production of a baseball game is so good, we see more missed calls than ever before, not because the umpires are worse, but because we're seeing more. You know, if you watch an old game, and certainly I have, they miss a lot of calls. I'd say they're worse. I think the umpires of the 1970s were far worse than the umpires of 2024, 2025. So I agree that most calls in a game, balls and strikes, are accurate. My issue is not that we need it because there are so many bad calls. It's that I'm kind of worried about the delay in a moment. And we already have this with replay, and I've accepted it, where there's a play at the plate, and whether you're happy or you're sad, you can't really be happy or sad for too long because you say, wait, let me see the replay. And I'm used to it. I don't love it, but I'm used to it. I don't like that now in baseball. I don't like the idea that we get a big strikeout and we've got to go wait. So it's not, Tom, with all due respect, about the umpires are missing so many calls, we need robo-umps. It's more, I'd rather, if you're going to use technology, just get them all right, as opposed to us potentially waiting around for those few calls, even if they got it right, but we're waiting on replay. That was my biggest issue. This is from Ryan. Ryan writes, hey, guys, love the show. I wanted to give you a little insight on the challenge system. Okay. I work in the public address booth for the Albuquerque Isotopes, the AAA affiliate of the Colorado Rockies. We've been using the ABS system for a few years now, and last year we went from having challenge games only on weekends to having them every game. Each team gets 3 challenges, and if you win them, you keep them. By the way, I agree with that. I mean, I think that should be in every sport. If you get a challenge right, you should keep it. So I'm with you. Our manager only allows our hitters and catchers to challenge calls because he thinks pitchers are too emotionally compromised to make calls themselves. This is his personal rule and not league-wide. Having a couple of years of experience with games completely called by robot umps and games called by human umps with challenges, my coworkers and I have formed a lot of opinions on the system. The overwhelming sentiment is the challenge system version sucks. You're exactly right when you say either have robo-umps call the entire game or don't do it at all. It slows down the game unnecessarily and adds confusion. Although, I will say, the way we show the graphics to the crowds on our video board is pretty simple and streamlined, a lot like what we saw in SNY. That said, it makes zero sense to add an extra point of possible confusion for players, umpires, fans, and ballpark staff when you have the infrastructure to literally get the call every single time. Naturally, this piqued my curiosity as to why even entertain the idea. From the little research I've done, it seems like this is almost entirely coming from the players and the umpires. Umpires are afraid of being phased out, and players seem to be just afraid of change. Both, I think, are weak excuses. Umpires have so much to deal with in a game. I think the ABS system could free them up for paying more attention to making every other kind of call, like plays at bases or watching for clock violations, etc. Or like you said, if ABS goes down, they're a great backup plan. As far as all the players go, they'd get used to it the way they did with the pitch clock and other changes over the years. Anyhow, I hope this helps, and I'm curious to hear what you think of it when you see it in action. Thanks for everything you do with the Rico, Ryan. Ryan, I do appreciate that insight as somebody that's seen it at the minor league level for certainly a lot more a period of time than I have, and a lot of people listening or watching. If, and I would love to ask this question to Rob Manfred, if the reason they're more interested in ABS than a full-blown robo-ump is hurting the umpire's feelings, that is just the epitome of ridiculous. I'll make the umpires feel better because I hear Country Joe West is a huge fan of the Rico, so he's probably watching right now. Joe and every other umpire, you'd still be important. Like you being behind the plate with an earpiece that's telling you if it's a ball or strike doesn't make you completely irrelevant. First of all, you've got to tell us it's a ball or strike, and so you can still give us your, you give us the big call. That's number one. Number two, foul tips. Foul tips still matter. Number three, plays at the plate still matter. Number four, he mentioned it, Ryan. We're looking at the pitch clock, man. We're looking at how many times you can throw to first base. We're looking at, did that ball hit the batter? Like, there are still tons of things that are necessary. Are we taking a pretty important thing away from you? Sure. But it's not like you're not on the field. I think people envisioned a robo-ump. Almost like, remember back in the day, this is for the wrestling fans out there, they had the anonymous GM of Raw, and it would be a laptop. Like Michael Cole would go up to a laptop and say, the anonymous GM says John Cena is going to wrestle tonight. It's not as if there's a computer just sitting there behind the plate that's telling us if it's a ball or strike. It's a human. It's the umpire. And yes, I would expect that at times the technology will go down and it won't skip a beat because you have a major league trained umpire behind the plate. So if the reason MLB is more attached to ABS than they are the actual full-blown robo-ump because they're upset about the umpire's feelings, or players are, we don't want that. Shut up. That's not a good answer. I'm sure there are other answers to defend ABS versus the robo-ump. That's not one of them. But I'm sure this will be a fun topic of conversation for the next few weeks. And then guess what will happen on March 27th? We'll forget it exists because we'll go back to there not being any ABS or any challenge system. And we'll just go back to baseball the way it is right now with plenty of challenges and plenty of reviews, but not when it comes to balls and strikes. Your thoughts off? I don't know if any of these various opinions have changed your initial reaction of ABS, but your thoughts early on.
I get there is a distraction element to it. It definitely. I don't know if it's as confusing as the one emailer said. I mean, I get it. It's one of those things where I think the basic fan right now understands at spring training what's going on. I think it's spring training. Chaos happens. I mean, people listen. Besides the stoppage in games, I mean, the amount of pitching changes and just people just the numbers on the back of the jersey. Nobody knows what the hell's going on anyway half the time. So it's kind of like a fitting for spring training. But I listen. I think that what you said is perfect. If you're going to commit to it, commit to it. Don't do this half-ass, hey, just, 2 challenges and call it a day type of thing. I think you really just have to overall, the umpire still has major influence on the game no matter what, especially when it comes down to plays at the plate. So come on.
And honestly, the umpire has more responsibility today than they did 10 years ago because of the pitch clock, because of the amount of times you get throw it over to first base. So it actually lessens the load a little bit. What's your opinion on David Stearns? Do you like David Stearns?
All right. I do. I'm a little hesitant to say that I'm in love with him because I still feel like he has that Milwaukee mindset. We're in New York. It's got to change a little bit. But that being said, I do trust him a lot.
David Stearns has a good track record. And David Stearns has been here for a brief period of time so that there's been some moves that have failed. There have been some moves that have worked. We haven't seen his prospect development yet because they've only had one draft. So there's a lot still to be written about David Stearns as the president of the New York Mets. But I asked you that question because I am going to read an email from one of our loyal listeners who literally hates David Stearns. And I find that fascinating because, again, we're a year plus into his tenure. In the 1 year he was here, the Mets stunningly went to the National League Championship Series and then followed that up. I know he doesn't get credit for this, but I'll just give you the facts. Followed that up by signing a generational offensive stud in Juan Soto. So I would say David Stearns in the early going has done a fairly good job. With that said, Zachary has his reasons, so let's take a listen. Hi, Evan. With the Mets' recent signing of minor league pitcher Connor Overton, I now pronounce that the Mets season is Overton. That's so bad. Overton is just one of the many failed David Stearns cost-cutting signings. This team has holes in its rotation and bullpen, especially with Montes and Minter out. Why does everyone think David Stearns is some genius? Over the past 2 seasons, Stearns has signed guys like Andre Scrub, Dylan McCovey, Max Kranick, Julio Teheran, Tyler J., Ty Adcock, Zach Short, Joey Wendell, Eddie Alvarez, Pablo Reyes, Ben Gamel, Eddie Rosario, Vinny Natoli, Tyler Zuber, Cole Sulser, Rylan Bannon, Matt Gage, etc. What do all of these guys have in common? They were never even brought up from AAA, or they were a net negative on the roster. And all of them were brought in as cheap substitutions for actual MLB players. To quote Albert Einstein, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. We need to stop praising David Stearns and hit the panic button. I don't expect Stearns to change his ways, but it's time for the fans to be tougher on him. Curious of your thoughts. I think what you did, and you left some out, by the way, because there were other moves or other players that he brought in that failed, like Adrian Hauser. We'll start with him. Maybe you don't include him because Tyrone Taylor's played well. I don't know. I think that while, yes, you made a list of players that they added, every team, I don't care if you're the Dodgers, the Yankees, whoever, you're going to add a lot of guys to your 40-man roster, some of which are guys that you don't necessarily have high expectations for. We call it just throwing it against the wall. Like, I don't think he ever signed Julio Teheran thinking he was going to do anything. It was a desperation move because the Mets had no pitching depth last year. I think when he claims Rylan Bannon off waivers, he's not thinking to himself, I just found the next Dan Uggla. So I don't think that list is fair at all. I think what we have to do is we have to look at the roster and say, are they good enough? The biggest question at the feet of David Stearns is this rotation. And it is completely fair to sit here in late February, point at it, and say, is that good enough? That's fair. It is fair to disagree with this team president on his philosophy around signing starting pitching. Totally fair. I disagree with him. Now, I don't think he's an idiot. I wouldn't be hitting the panic button, but I've said it numerous times here on the Rico. I would give a big money, long-term contract to a starting pitcher. I wouldn't do it with 3 guys. I disagree with the Yankees. It's funny how in this town we have such different philosophies. Like, would I feel comfortable having 3 guys in my rotation, as good as they are? Garrett Cole's tremendous, Max Fried tremendous. Would I feel good about having 3 guys in their 30s signed to long-term deals making it? No. I disagree with the Yankees. But I also would like to have that one guy. I would go 1. I wouldn't even go 2. 1 guy I would take that risk on into their 30s if I deem that it's a smart risk. Now, maybe, and this is where I'll give David Stearns the slight benefit of the doubt, maybe he's looked at the free agents of the last 2 years and said, not the gamble I want to make. I don't trust Corbin Burns on a 6 or 7 year contract. I don't trust it. I see his velocities down a tick. I see his spin rates down a tick. Nope, not doing it. Same thing with Max Fried. Nope, not doing it. Maybe, and we'll find out as the years go on, like we have our judgments on what we think he's doing. And he always answers this by saying it's a case-by-case basis. So to his credit, he doesn't say as a firm rule of signing starting pitchers who are over 30 to long-term deals. He says it's case-by-case. Well, maybe Dylan Cease is the case where he is willing to go long-term. I don't know. I guess we'll see next year, right? But as of right now, 2 off seasons into David Stearns, I probably would be more aggressive at adding 1 starting pitcher that I look at and say, all right, I'm giving him big money. I'm giving him long-term, and I totally get the risk that's attached to it, but I would do it with 1 guy. I don't kill him yet because, hey, it worked last year. I mean, and maybe that is the new strategy in baseball. I'm just going to sign guys to short-term deals. Now, there's a big bust factor to that. I think you're going to have to develop some arms, and they're clearly trying to do that with some of the arms in this system. Brandon Sproat, who I think will be up here at some point. Blade Tidwell, who is starting a spring training game on Monday. But I think it's definitely fair to look at this rotation, and we are going to go deep into it on our next Rico and say, hey, is that good enough? Completely fair. But to say he's a disaster, to say the season's over, to say stop praising him. Look, he's been here for 1.5 years. He deserves praise. He's not perfect. He's not going to be perfect. And you know where I give him a lot of credit? I give him credit that when he signed Joey Wendell and realized very early on, boy, this is not working, he had the balls to call up his billionaire owner, and he did, and say, all right, Steve, remember I told you to spend a few $1 million on Joey Wendell? Yes, David. Cut him. Like, I do think like a GM or team president deserves credit for that, because just because you paid someone a lot of money doesn't mean you should run them out on the field when they are, in your words, a net negative. So I give him a little bit of credit for that, but he's not perfect. And I think what we'll do here, and we've done it all off season, and we'll certainly do it during the season, is be critical when it's deserved. But it'd be stupid to be critical just for the sake of being critical. You agree with that? Or do you think Roger, what's this guy's name? Hold on a second. Zachary is right. That David Stearns is basically a douche. He didn't say that, but he was implying it.
Let me just say something. And again, I was very difficult and hard on David Stearns during this whole Pete Alonso process, and I understand why he does it, and I respect why he does it. The guy, again, like you said, brought the Mets to the playoffs last year with a team that we didn't think was all that good. We thought they were mediocre, but did a great job with that. We are on the cusp of doing something for the first time in the history of the New York Mets, and I'm very confident that they're going to succeed in that goal, and that's make the playoffs 3 out of 4 years. It's never happened before. Think about that. In 60-plus years of the New York Mets, they've gone back-to-back twice. That's basically what they've done. So we now have an opportunity to get more consistency in the playoffs, and because of that, you got to not praise the guy, but respect what he's doing.
Yeah, I think there's a balance right now. I mean, I think that no matter how good you are at your job, you deserve criticism if you genuinely disagree with something. I mean, there are going to be things we disagree with. I think back to a year ago when they signed J.D. Martinez, and we were so excited about it. I vehemently disagreed that Mark Vientos wasn't on the team to start the year. I disagree. I didn't understand it. And I don't even know who's right or wrong, because you could argue, and I'd be curious. Hoff and I are going to go down to spring training in a couple of weeks. Are we able to announce what we're doing yet? I don't even know if we can.
Oh, I did it over the weekend.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Well, we are
yes.
going down to spring training, and I guess Hoff already announced it. We're going to be doing a live Rico Brogna from Jupiter, Florida, at a beautiful beer garden. What's the name of the beer garden again? Das?
Das. D-A-S.
D-A-S. Now, I don't know how many people listen to the Rico, and on Saturday, March 8th, let me get the exact date. I don't know how many people who listen to the Rico Brogna are going to be in Jupiter, Florida on Saturday, March 8th. There may only be 2 for all I know. But if you are in Jupiter, Florida, if you are going to that Met game on Saturday night at 6:40 at Roger Dean Stadium, we're going to effing Rico at a beer garden right across the street. And I'll tell you something else, Hoff. I haven't told you this yet. I'm getting down to Roger Dean Stadium. I'm going to park my car. I'm going to come over to the beer garden. And why wouldn't I be drinking it up? I mean, I ain't driving for like 4 or 5 hours. There's a baseball game after. So I wouldn't say it's a drunk Rico. That wouldn't be fair. I'd say it's a tipsy Rico. I'd say we're having a good time, Rico, live from Jupiter, Florida. I can't wait for that.
A live tipsy Rico. I'm in. And since you're driving, I'm getting a ride with you home, and I'm going to drink even more than you.
That's true. So what happens is after the pod is over, I sober up while I'm scoring the game. While I'm scoring a spring training game, Hoff's just going like 10 sheets to the wind, and I'm the designated driver. That is very true, and that's all fine, by the way. That's all good. So, yeah, if anybody's out there or you're planning a trip, we will be doing a live Rico Brogna from Das, which is this beautiful beer garden literally across the street from Roger Dean Stadium. And I think I don't know if we have an official time. I'd say like 4:30, 5 o'clock. We'll get things started about an hour or so, hour and a half before the game starts. And we'll talk Mets, and, we'll have a good time. So stay tuned for that. And the reason I brought that up was I was about to tell you, when we go down there, we may get some brief conversations with a variety of Met players. And one thing I'm so curious about to ask Mark Vientos, so curious, is does he think not starting the year with the team and being in the minor leagues, disrespected in my opinion, and then coming up, hitting a game-winning home run and going back down to the minor leagues, did that actually help him? Is that something we can look back on and say, you know what? I don't know if I ever get here without that, because that's the one area where I pause on ripping David Stearns for something I disagreed with him last year. I don't know. I mean, maybe that kind of humbling was necessary. I mean, maybe the Mets telling him, sorry, I know you had a good spring training. Your ass is going back down to AAA. Maybe that did contribute to the brilliant season Mark Vientos had last year.
Well, the one thing I think of, David Stearns came in. He had a lot going on. Again, he changed a lot of the people behind the scenes. And did he really properly get to evaluate the entire team? Did he, base a lot of opinions on what other people were saying? And clearly I'm not saying there was a bias, but there was a reason why Billy Epler didn't bring him up, right? There was a reason
Yeah.
why Mark Vientos was
Buck
back.
hated
So,
him. You could tell Buck really did not believe in him.
yeah. So they're clearly, I think a lot of what David Stearns based his judgment on might have been off of that, to be fair.
I want to ask, let me read this email and then I'll ask a question at the end because it's one I want everybody to think about. It's actually very intriguing. But the last email I want to read is from Jordan about Ronnie Mauricio. He writes, first off, I've been listening to you religiously since the playoffs. Thank you. Wish I'd been listening for years longer. Just realized the pod picture is of you holding a scorecard up at Shea Stadium. Not sure why it took me so long to notice that. Love it. There you go. Finally. Second of all, I don't think I've heard enough talk about Ronnie Mauricio this offseason. Saquon tore his ACL. Players come back better from ACLs than they used to. What if Ronnie is an athletic, speedy, swing-hitting power hitter who can play almost any position? Saw flashes of that in 2023. Knowing we have him, Acuna, Jet Williams, Brett Beatty, and Nick Madrigal, why aren't the Mets trading McNeil for another pitcher? I can truly see Ronnie being a difference maker on this team, which makes them better than we expected. He should be a second base option earlier than people are saying. If McNeil isn't in 300 in April, I'd be calling Ronnie up because I'm confident he'll be crushing it in AAA. So a couple of things you said. Number one, I don't know for sure the Mets were shopping Jeff McNeil. I was certainly big on shopping Jeff McNeil before this offseason began. I just don't think he has a lot of value. Despite his strong second half until he got hurt, I don't think that with the $15.5 million he's making this year and next year, you were getting much for Jeff McNeil. That's number one. Number two, let Ronnie Mauricio go down and hit. If he hits enough, I think that, yeah, and Jeff McNeil isn't performing, sure, he could be back up here playing second base. He could be back up here getting DH at-bats. I would not rule out the DH spot opening up. What if Starling Marte can't stay healthy? What if he's not performing? I don't think that Jesse Winker has to be guaranteed a lot of at-bats. He could turn into a fourth outfielder. So I think there will be avenues for Ronnie Mauricio to get that chance to play. Oh, one other thing from the spring training games on Sunday, Sandy Alcantara pitched for the Marlins. He's, of course, recovering from Tommy John. He was pumping it at 98, 99 miles an hour. I know there's going to be a lot of talk about him. When are the Marlins going to trade him? Should we go after him? Number one, yes. Yes, I would. When you look at the contract he has and how team-friendly it is, absolutely I'd be all over it. But I remember saying this during the offseason. He's going to have to pitch well, build back up his value, and then I'm not sure if it's the trade deadline or maybe it's next year. The Marlins will trade him. I don't think there's any question that Sandy Alcantara will eventually be moved by the Florida Marlins. But I think because he is coming off such a major injury, they're not going to do it now. As far as the contract is concerned, listen to this. So Sandy was making no money. He signed a contract before he got to free agency. They bought out ARB years and they bought out some free agent years. So his first bump in salary is happening right now. He's making $17 million this year, $17 million in 26. And then there's a club option at $21 million in 2027. He'll be 31 years old. So you're looking at a 3-year contract for a guy who not too long ago was one of the best pitchers in baseball. And you're basically paying them about $61 million. Actually, less than that. About $55 million. So I think the Marlins will trade him. I think we will have plenty of conversation about this because the Mets should be in on him. And the Marlins have already shown you they don't give a rat's ass about trading inside the division. They've shown that with us many years ago. They showed that recently with the trade they made with Philadelphia for Jesus Luzardo. So it is certainly somebody to keep an eye on. Now, I want to ask this question. I want you to think about this. Pete Alonso, barring injury, is going to break the Mets' all-time home run record. Right now, Pete Alonso is sitting at 226. David Wright is at 242. He will pass him. And then Darryl Strawberry has the record at 252. So I think we all agree that if Pete is healthy, he will break Darryl Strawberry's record. And most of us agree that he may not be long for our world as Met fans, that there's a good chance he's not on the team next year or the year after that. 15 years from now. What year is that 15 years from now? 2040? Ugh. God, it feels forever from now. In 2040, who is the Mets' all-time home run leader? At the end of Juan Soto's contract 15 years from now, who will be the Mets' all-time home run leader? Will it be Pete Alonso? He's already at 226. If he does finish his career here and play 6 or 7 more years here, and he's hitting 30 home runs each of those years, do the math. That's another 200-plus home runs. That would get to Pete Alonso to about 430, 440, 450. Is it Pete Alonso? Is it Francisco Lindor, who currently is tied with Brandon Nimmo for 14th on the all-time list at 110? Lindor has how many more years left on his Met contract? 8 years, 7 years? I'm losing track. If he's hitting, let's say, 25 per year over the next 7 years, boy, I really got to get a calculator out because I get confused. 25 times 7, that's 175 home runs. He's at 110. That gets him to about 285, which beats Darryl and could beat Pete if Pete's not here. Or is the answer Juan Soto? The guy who has not hit a major league home run in a regular season game for the Mets. If Juan Soto goes out and hits 30 home runs over the life of a 15-year contract, that is 450 home runs. Now, I know end of his career, he'll slow down. All right, so let's say he averages 25 home runs over those 15 years. That still gets him to 375. So what is your answer to that? Who will be, and I know this is the longest of long-term bets because I'm looking at 15 years down the road, and I don't know if we'll still be doing the Rico 15 years from now. I hope. This could be something we do until we're dead. Why not? But who is the Mets' all-time home run king 15 years from now? I'll give you my answer on the next Rico, and of course you could email us, thericob@gmail.com, thericob@gmail.com. We will do a real deep dive on 24 versus 25. What the Mets are going to have to do to not just replicate their performance from a year ago, but surpass it. We'll look at the offense. We'll look at the starting pitching. We'll look at the bullpen. We'll also look at the trends over the last half decade on what it takes to be a playoff team. So a lot to get into on the next edition of the Rico Brogna. So please download, subscribe, rate, review, all that great stuff. We appreciate you listening, downloading, and hanging out with us on episode 435 of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.